In this video, we're going to look at NLP and how it can help you and what it is and what difference NLP can make in your life and why it's important. NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. Neuro, the mind, linguistics, language and how we say it, and programming, putting everything together, the two together to help you move forward. When people talk about the neuro part, they're generally talking about the nervous system and the mind. If you take the nervous system in the human body and the mind being the top, so to speak, of the pyramid of nerves that people get, we look at the way we lead our lives using visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory and gustatory methods of reasoning and learning. Let's talk about those for a second. First of all, visual, anything that we see. Some people are very visual. And when they're talking about being visual, you'll listen to their language. And their language will have very visual words. I see what you mean. Yes, I could picture that. And they tend to look upwards. Then you have the people who are auditory. And if you ask them a question, their eyes will go probably to side and they'll go, And they'll ask themselves a question and almost listen for an answer because they process things in an auditory fashion. They sort of backchat to themselves slightly. Then you've got the kinesthetic people who tend to look down. Not down their nose, but people who tend to look downwards. If you go to a child and the child is happy, their eyes will go up. Look, isn't this wonderful? Look at this, oh wow. And they look upwards. When they're contemplating something, or listening to something, they tend to put their head on one side. And if you were to tell a child off and the child is unhappy, the first place it looks is down at the carpet. So they're into the feelings, the kinesthetic. And people, kinesthetic-wise, they'll go, oh yeah, I touched something like that the other day. Or, yeah, I feel it in my bones. And they'll start using the feel, the touch, feel, that sort of thing. Then you have the olfactory, the people who get things via the smell. Like you could be walking past a bakery and you have that lovely smell of freshly baked bread. And perhaps you go, oh yeah, that takes me back to when my grandmother used to bake bread on Sunday mornings or whatever it happens to be. Or, gosh, that smell of that curry reminds me of a really good time. It just instantly transforms you and takes you back to where something marvellous or not so marvellous happened. So that's the olfactory. And you've got the gustatory, the things that you taste. Oh, I remember that. It's not as good as my mother's or whatever happens to be. And people then, they have it and they go back in time to a time when they were happy or sad or whatever it was, where the taste reminds them of something. If you've seen the film Ratatouille, there's a wonderful scene in that film towards the end where the critic that everybody's frightened of is in the restaurant and he wants to meet the chef because he's had this experience of having ratatouille. And as soon as he tasted it, the film took him back to when he was a boy and he was unhappy and he was given this wonderful bowl of ratatouille and that made him feel good. And the film has a wonderful way of just encapsulating that moment. And he just sits there for hours wanting to meet the chef. I'm not going to give the film away, but it's well worth a good watch. Again, it appeals to people on different levels. So when we're talking about the neuro part, it's all about the nervous system, the mind, so things we see, things we hear, things we feel, things we smell, and things we taste. Now let's look at linguistics. Linguistics is the use of language and non-verbal communications. You know how sometimes a stare or an angry look or a nasty look or a quizzical look can give you a message from somebody? They don't have to say anything, but just the way they look at you or something that they do, some action, some twitch. that you'll go, I'm missing my mark. I'm not communicating at a good level. I can see this in my everyday life. Sometimes when you talk to people, you can see them switch off. They're not verbally saying, go away, I'm bored. However, what they are doing is they're giving unconscious signals to the outside world that they're ready to move on. Certainly in meetings and negotiations, when I'm coaching some of my clients, I teach them how to really notice the intricate details of people's behaviour, and it's pretty well all unconscious, it's all non-verbal. So you know really quickly whether your sales pitch is hitting the mark or not. So rather than just going straight out and telling people everything that you think they need to hear, by looking at them and talking to them, you can start working out what it is they're after. And then if you can match their request, you've got the sale. Whether you're communicating in an office or communicating with the ones that you love. If you learn the art of communication in a non-verbal way, you're going to get the person communicating with you much better. Therefore, your chances are your productivity is going to go up, and the chances are you're going to be more successful. Both you, the business, and everybody is going to be happier because everything is moving upwards. So when we talk about the linguistics, it's not necessarily just words. But when we say to people, things to people, they make pictures in their heads. They make sounds, they hear sounds. If someone says, the other day I was thinking about some sheep and some cattle, some people will actually hear the sheep in the background baying or a cow mooing. Some people may even smell the farmyard just in their minds. So it's all about the way people process information. So using the neuro part, the linguistic part, it's really going to help you move forward. Sometimes tastes. You can say, you know how that tastes? And people go, yeah, I do. And they're already there in their mind. They've actually got the experience. Some people say a restaurant menu is the most wonderful thing. Because as they read the menu and they're beginning to choose, they're already in the process of tasting. They're already in that wonderful escapism almost, where they're really enjoying the meal. Because the meal is actually whatever the chef produces. The menu is just a map of what the plate's going to look like or what it's going to taste like. Or perhaps if it's on a sizzling hot plate like you get in some restaurants, what it sounds like. So when we're talking about the linguistic side, there's so many different ways of communicating with people. So by learning the best way to communicate, whether it's using visual words, whether it's using feeling words, whether it's using sound words. That sounds good to me. Yeah, I like the sound of that. I see what you mean. Oh, no, I can't picture that. And you start listening. And as soon as you start listening, your communication with others will go up. I don't like the feeling that. I don't like the feeling. Yeah? So when you're talking to people, you start noticing the words that they use. When you're in a meeting, when you're negotiating, especially negotiating with the ones that you love. If you and your family have got someone who's very kinesthetic, very feely, using visual words won't really work. It's interesting that if you watch the television here in the UK, if you have a car advert like a BMW, and there are other car makes obviously available, you have a BMW being advertised, it's aiming for the visual market because everything is very bright, very angular. And they use the lighting to really bring out the edges of the car. When you look at Marks and Spencer's advert, they're aiming for the people who feel more. They're looking for the kinesthetic side. So when they show you the pictures, you've got steam coming off it, and that makes you feel. It's also hitting the visual. It's also hitting the sound people. So when you look at the way people communicate and the way the advertisements in the outside world come and nestle within you, sometimes it'll make you feel kinesthetic, really, really good. And sometimes you'll see the point of the advert very quickly, visual. And sometimes you'll hear that tune again and again and again. And that's an anchor. That's, as soon as you hear that tune, you'll think of the advert. So when you look at the advertisements that are coming your way, they're hitting you through NLP so many different ways, trying to register a place in you to make you go out and purchase their products. So whether it's going to a restaurant, whether it's going to see a film, whether it's buying a car, whether it's buying a steamy chocolate cake or whatever it is they have on Marks and Spencer's around Christmas. So you start looking at the way that they're communicating with you, because they know through their research how many people in certain age groups are kinesthetic, who like the feely stuff. They know the number of people who are more visual. So when you are listening and watching the advertisements, just try and work out what they're doing and how they're trying to communicate with you. It's great fun. And that brings us on to the programming side, because the programming side is what all the advertisers use. It's the relationship you have with the neuro side, the linguistic side. Now you could Google NLP or Neuro Linguistic Programming and you will have hundreds and hundreds of different versions of different people saying what it means to them and what it is to them. Chandler, who's one of the co-creators of NLP, in his words, say it is the manual of the mind, because he looks at the way the human mind works and has studied and modelled and questioned and pushed and pulled all these different ways that people communicate, the ways that people do things. For example, if you see somebody you'll know, you'll go, "Hi," and your eyebrows will go up. And in the early days of NLP, people went, "I wonder why their eyes moved. I wonder when the eyes went up." When people scowl, why do their eyebrows go down? When someone's embarrassed, oh, look, they're going red. These are all unconscious. So they start looking at the relationship that your body has, and they use what we call sensory acuity to really notice the minute changes in the human body. One of the most famous of all the therapists, to my knowledge, ever born is Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson was studied by the creators of NLP because when Milton Erickson was young, he had polio. And at one point, all he could do was lie on the bed, and the only thing he could actually move were his eyes. So when he was looking, he was observing in a very, very interesting way. He was noticing the tiny heartbeats and the tiny movements of the vessels on your neck and on his parents' neck. So he could tell what their mood was. He was noticing that sometimes when people said something, their skin went very pale, and other times it went very red. They noticed that their breathing changed depending on their state, depending on their mood. He noticed their lip size. Sometimes when there's something they like, the lips became bigger. And when things they didn't like, they became smaller. And you notice all these things. You notice the tiny little differences in people's physiology. And that's what the study of NLP is. It's looking at the ways our bodies change. Now, John Grinder and Mr. Bandler spent months studying people like Milton Erickson, Fritz Perl, Virginia Satir, all people who are at the forefront of their profession. And since then, they have themselves have been studied. Robert Dilts and people like that, Stephen Gilligan. And the whole movement of understanding how the mind works, how the body works, at a non-verbal way, the unconscious mind way, has created this whole new area of life that has been labelled NLP. So basically that's what NLP is. It's a study of human behaviour, why we do things at certain times, and why sometimes we can't stop ourselves doing it. If you look at general works that have happened since, the lie detector measures tiny differences in the body's electronic impulses going around the body. So when someone is lying, that impulse changes and that picks that up. So NLP is not necessarily a lie detector, but you can tell once you really get tuned in to the intricate details of how humans change, you can actually see the imprint and what's actually going on behind the mask, behind the scenes. So that's my version. And you may have comments to make. Please make them underneath, because this is a really good discussion. It's been going on for years, by the way. And sometimes everybody's right and sometimes everybody's wrong. If you'd like to continue this journey with me, please hit the subscribe button, and the little bell on it. And once a week, I'll have another video, another broadcast for you. And by doing that, we're going to go on this journey, and I will teach you all the different techniques and open up your mind to a new way of understanding human behaviour. Whether it's using the affirmations that I've already talked about on previous broadcasts. And now as we move into the world of NLP, we'll be looking at anchoring, we'll be looking at all the different ways and how we as characters, because we're all different, luckily we're all different, but because we're all different, the way that we process information. So hit the subscribe button and please feel free to comment below. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video.